They are not trying to help Alaska. They are trying to help their bottom line. Every single time they are trying to help their bottom line, they are never going to suggest something that is in our best interest.
And they shouldn't. We need to be a better poker player, a better negotiator across the table. Joe Green, who I served with, who came out of the oil industry, his whole career was the oil industry. We finally agreed to a confidentiality and looked at some things that were part of the negotiation on the gas line back then. I remember him coming back. He's like, they lied to me. I mean, he couldn't get it through his, or he could get it through his head, but barely, that he'd been lied to his whole life. And I remember saying to Joe, yeah, but it's kind of, they had to. It's not their fault. It's our fault.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is chair of the Alaska Democratic Party, Eric Croft. Eric was born to Chancey and Tony Croft in Anchorage, but Eric grew up with his two siblings traveling back and forth to Juneau, where their father started off in the House and then served in the Senate, where he eventually became Senate president. Chancey Croft was the Democratic candidate for governor in 1978. Eric would serve in the Alaska House from 1997 to 2006, when he too would run for governor, losing the Democratic nomination to former Governor Tony Knowles. Eric served as Anchorage School Board President from 2013 to 2016 and served on the Anchorage Assembly from 2016 to 2019. He unsuccessfully ran for mayor of Anchorage in 2009 and in 2021. While Eric was in the Alaska House, his minority leader was Ethan Berkowitz. Ethan Berkowitz would go on to be mayor while Eric was on the Anchorage Assembly. That's the Ethan that you'll hear referenced several times today. During this conversation, Eric and I discussed the U.S. military and President Trump's quelling of criticism of military operations. This interview was recorded before the United States invaded Iran. Our comments are even more relevant today. Eric Croft, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
Most folks who know Alaska politics know that you come from a political family. So your dad was Leland Chancey Croft. You're Eric Chancey Croft.
Yeah, we're so poor we can only afford a couple of names in this family. No, yeah, along a family name, and Dad went by Chancey, but I just go by Eric.
Tell us about your childhood.
So, I mean, he's sitting here in this building. A lot of memories of childhood was early politics, political activism, fundraisers and things. I didn't even know you could have a party without asking people for money until, like, we as kids put a little donation jar in the bathroom at some fundraiser and got in trouble. We just thought you charged people for everything. But a lot of the memories of this place, of coming down to Juneau, we would have one sister and one brother, and we always had dogs. And so it was this big mess of a family coming down here every winter.
Because you were born in Anchorage, your parents had moved to Anchorage in 1962?
Shortly after statehood, yeah. Dad and his best friend from law school came up and looked around and fell in love with it, and he convinced Mom to do it. They were from West Texas, flat, dry, ugly.
Like Midland?
Midland, Odessa, yeah. If anyone's ever been, why did you go? And yeah, they both wanted to get out, and I think that's what one of the things they liked best about each other is, do you want to get as far away from here as possible? Nice people, but the country's not beautiful. Yeah, Dad was in the legislature from 68 to 78 and some formative times. I mean, that's only 8 years after statehood.
And you were only 5 or 6 years old when he was running the first time.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories of that?
No, I have vague memories of fundraisers and things, but a lot of evolving memories of this place, of running around these halls. And a sense that something big was going on, right? There was a sense then, and I hope we can catch it again, of limitless possibilities. Alaska was new. We could avoid the mistakes. We could do things really right. And so Dad was in on writing a lot of, when you're a new state, you need a judicial code, you need a workers' comp law, you need everything. And you're writing it tabula rasa, clean slate. We were coming here from when I was 4 or 5 to when I was 15.
And do you remember when he was president of the Senate? Was that a big deal?
Yeah. When Bill Ray, who was a senator from here, retired, I spoke at his thing and was teasing him about, he was my best friend when Dad was president of the Senate. And then after Dad wasn't president of the Senate, Bill Ray was less accommodating. Like in those days, they deliver the paper, but then you could also, they had a way of delivery where you could go down and buy the Empire for 10 cents and then sell it on the street for 25. So that was sort of their informal way you could get people to go circulate. So I would go down, Dad would give us, he would give us a quarter and later 50 cents. Anyway, big money in those days. My brother and I would go get papers, go sell them in the hallways. And our sales were better when Dad was president of the Senate. Those things moved.
Did you think growing up in this building, basically, like, I want to be in politics and serve in this building too?
I think a lot of people, I did the anti thing. So Dad teased me for a while. Mom and Dad died in 22, but of a pompous speech I gave as a sort of heading to college guy, how I was never going to do what he did and I was going to do like computer math stuff. And then it just was slowly very attractive. Came back, by then had decided computers weren't exactly my thing, and went to law school and then came back here with my fabulous wife, Joanna, convinced her to come from California. And it just slowly, I think there was an infectious sense, as I said, of possibility, of obligation too, of it is our privilege and our duty to help somehow, to make these things work. And so when Kay Brown announced she was retiring, I decided to run. And he thought that was hilarious because I had said I wasn't going to do that sort of thing. Kay Brown, essentially she said, I've called every woman I can think of in this district. None want to run. So I was kind of best of gender.
That's exactly what happened to me with Ivy Sponbles. I've never put that on the record. That
We get secrets from him now.
She was very important that she replaced herself with a woman.
And understandable. It's a little humbling to say I took half the crew and couldn't find any one of them, so maybe you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Kay Brown has come up recently in the podcast. I did a whole series on journalism in a very unusual way. What I would say is just that,
do tell, Dick.
just because she was a writer for the Alaska Advocate, and that, doing the series on journalism and interviewing her ex-husband, Pat Doherty, that's all a part of Alaska lore and history. And then her, she's got such an interesting story. She's been invited on the podcast many times, and she will be a great guest when she comes on. But so you replaced her in the House.
Yeah, tough to replace. She was really one of the hardest working around, which people know. But I was there from kind of 96 to 2006. And I was in the minority the whole time. Congratulations, you guys been in the whole time. I mean, that has its challenges too. You guys have the burden of leading, and that's a pain. The minority role is sort of to represent their viewpoint and try and stop what they see as really horrible stuff. So it's an inherently kind of negative role. And if you don't watch it, it can change you. Mm-hmm. Everything about this place can. I mean, I tell people, and it's hard to describe if you haven't been in it, it's a gigantic character test because the process will find whatever your weakness is. Is it ego that likes to be stroked? You got a bunch of lobbyists who are really friendly, really cool people, the best at it. And they're looking for, it's not always as crude. It's rarely as crude as bribery or whatever, but they're looking for whatever will get you moved. And so you've got to have a really good sense of yourself. And I think this caucus and coalition does. But yeah, the danger of being in the minority is you just get bitter, right?
Yeah. So I did 2 years in the minority, and this is my second year in the majority. And the grass is always greener on the other side. Yeah. I mean, dare I say, I think I was really good at being in the minority. And I don't know if I'm really good at being in the majority yet.
I think you are, but it's different talents. You got to shift gears.
It's really different. I think, so we had Joint Armed Services Committee recently, and since that's talking about federal issues, we're definitely in the minority there. Yeah. And so I got to do a lot of my minority behavior. That's right. Yeah, I did. I got to do lots of my minority behavior.
I think the best thing, right, is to have both experiences. It would have been great to be in the majority. But it's different set of talents, different way of looking at it. Ethan and I were a pretty good team then in the minority with John Davies and some other really superstars. I remember it afterwards, and then I was on the assembly when Ethan was mayor, and he's like, it's just like being in the legislature. And I was like, Ethan, no, it's not. You're in charge here. You got to go to a different place.
I think this is right, that Ethan was the only Anchorage mayor whose previous experience was only being in the legislature.
And I think, and only in the minority.
Yeah,
right?
interesting.
And they're just way different roles. Mayor needs to be this visionary leader. It's all about you and the direction you want to go. You can play act in the minority that you're doing that, but your thing is to understand where the majority's taking the ship and what you can do to affect it in the ways you want to do it.
Stop bad things from happening as best you can. Yeah. Do you have any particular memories from that period? Because it was a very tumultuous period in Alaska history. There was the constitutional amendment that marriage is between a man and a woman. There was the Vico scandal playing out.
It was just there.
It was there.
Felt it. Yeah.
But,
yeah, let's deal with both of those because they were fun. Like I got thrown in. One of my earliest, toughest votes was that. I never really doubted which way I'd vote. So I voted against the constitutional amendment that it's a double negative, right? That banned gay marriage, but in effect for gay marriage. But we lost. Irene Nicolai got defeated because of that. It's hard for people to remember because we've moved so fast on this issue. One of the bigger, of the hot button big issues of the last 100 years, this has evolved the quickest, I think. But it was a really dangerous issue back then. That was the days of, there wasn't even the gay community didn't really endorse you because that could hurt. What you did was you just called, you knew who the network, and you'd call, and people would call their friends and say, Eric's a good candidate. But you knew enough that when that squeaked by in the legislature, you need 2/3 for constitutional amendments. We thought we defeated it. We had 13 Democrats, plus Con Bundy, who was this weird Republican guy, university professor, curmudgeonly, hated unions, but on social issues was pretty good. And he stuck. He didn't really like moral majority type stuff. He was a stubborn dude. And like I said, horrible on environmental, horrible on union, but good on that. And so we had 14 votes. They need 27. We were holding. But we knew one of our legislators would fold probably. Cut a deal, right? Carl Moses ended up switching his vote. And to be fair on that, he's a rural legislator, probably iffy on the issue, but more importantly, they were always trying to whack him. He had very few levers in that as a minority member in an exposed rural district to get his schools and roads and bridges done. Obviously, I wish he hadn't. But anyway, so he had cut the deal in. I remember Tom Bryce from Fairbanks, who is still down here doing work for public employees, but he was our Scott Kawasaki, if you will. He was they keep coming after him and he keeps stealing back victories, right? And they were going to get Tom this year. And he and I were kind of gun nuts. So in a late session, we went to the range and we're driving back. And I'm like, Tom, if Carl Moses flips, which I think he's about to, because we'd seen the capital budget and there was a lot of Carl stuff in there, right? That's a good clue at the end of session of what's going on. I was like, you should switch too, because they're coming after you. Right? And it was just beautiful. Tom said, and I'll take out the expletives because Tom can barely speak without dropping some F-bombs, but he's like, if my district doesn't want me to represent them, because I think two people should be able to love each other and it's none of the government's damn business, I'll do something else. And I thought of it over and over because I knew what I was going to do. But when other tough votes came in, you got to decide, is this a core thing? And I'm willing to lose a seat over it. We see so many chicken shit, mainly Republicans, some Democrats, but who seem to think the most important thing is keeping the seat. And there's 3 or 4 other more important things than that.
Well, we've observed that. We had a vote on trans girls in sports on the floor of the House. And we were solid, but we had one particular legislator who thought that this vote would really hurt in re-election and flipped at the last minute. And I think it killed that legislator. Yeah. I think it's why they decided actually not to run. And so it's kind of one of those things. It's like, it seems like, well, it doesn't really matter. It's going to pass anyway. I'll flip my vote. But I think it can weigh on your conscience.
Let's just do a 4x4 thing. Like a tough vote that you think will hurt you and you vote yes or no, right?
Yeah.
You vote your conscience or you don't. The best feeling in the world is saying, fuck it, I'll do what I feel is right, and then winning re-election.
Yeah.
That's a neat.
Yeah.
Your phrasing, he didn't, this person anyway, didn't maybe lose, but decided to get out. But
If they had lost,
yeah,
then
that's the worst part of the thing.
they voted against their own,
Yeah.
moral compass and
lose.
lost. Which you never know. It could have happened that way.
Well, I mean, we did, Irene Nicolai, neat lady, voted with us, stayed with us. And like I said, then it was just, when it got to the ballot, that thing passed 2-1.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope it would fail by the same amount now.
I think it would totally fail today.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, with the Federal Respect for Marriage Act that passed a couple years ago, with the only Republican state to have both senators vote for it was Alaska. Murkowski and Sullivan voted to protect gay marriage, basically. And I thanked him for that.
And then sort of bookends, you mentioned the Vico.
Yeah. Well, you know what I want to do?
Yeah.
Because you served, I'm going totally out of order,
Yeah.
but you served on the assembly when you guys finally passed the Equal Rights Amendment.
So it sort of got to.
So you got to do like sort of the gay rights vote twice, and you won the second time.
Yeah. And
that was very controversial as well. I took a ton, because, it had been up multiple times.
And when it was up, they did this filibuster of everybody.
Yes.
Consent and all that horrible summer of hate stuff.
And that was Bill Evans, who was the Republican who flipped. And great credit to him, because you guys included trans issues.
That's right. And I remember being in on those, like it was a broad coalition. And I wasn't anywhere near a key part, but was in some of those meetings. And it was discussed, like, do we take a slightly safer route? And to everyone's credit, right, you thought about it. You raised the issue and thought about it. It would be stupid to not actually have the discussion. And so everyone kind of, and then people just came around to, we're not going to do this thing that is so close to our hearts and throw a community off the side to begin with, right? So let's make it a little riskier and feel right. Mm-hmm. And that's always a tough decision. I'm down here for Democratic Party stuff, and we're going to be, we have Matt Schultz, we love, and is great on stuff, and is a Democrat, and then Bill Hill is doing a whole bunch of stuff out there. And I'm going to preach to my guys, not quite preach like Schultz does, but I'm going to have Bill Hill come and speak. And I'm going to take some flack for it. But I think what we got to do is, look, I think I'm still a Schultz guy, but we can't be afraid of hearing the other side. Like, we've got to at least listen and make an info. You're going to make a decision.
Well, you know what I've learned?
Yep. Because I may need it soon.
Well, no, I mean, I really have learned this. I think it's not always about re-election. It's sometimes about moving your legislation forward and your relationships in the building and not wanting to come out too strong as like this obvious progressive liberal. You want to be able to sort of, I'm very moderate and we can work together.
Yeah.
I have never done that.
And I said this job is really weird. It looks for your weaknesses. And that weakness is this kind of, I got to compromise myself before I can talk to you. Mm-hmm. It's exactly the opposite. What makes sense is to have a very firm idea of who you are. People know it. You're not hiding it. You don't have to be a dick about it. Like, so it's.
Well, I am a dick about it sometimes.
Okay, all right.
I am a dick about it. And I'll just say there are lobbyists that do not visit my office, period. And I sometimes have like my feelings hurt a little bit. I'm like, you're not even going to try. But yeah.
It is the trick of the thing. So maybe that's what you need to work on. But it certainly is, be authentically you and then find a way. Because it's a cliche, but you don't know when that person who hated on you at ICE loves the road you're talking about or loves the, so you have to have this weird capacity to be, all right, we just fought. Can I get you on the education boat?
But, and I know a lot of people criticize me sometimes for talking about national issues. I'm a state legislator. Right. But there's part of me that feels like I'm in the twilight zone sometimes, that it's like, how important are some of these issues if we're possibly losing our democracy? And I know that people will say that I'm being hysterical right now. There are certain listeners who will say I'm being hysterical right now. But for me, that is my truth. Yeah. When Donald Trump suggests that U.S. Senator Mark Kelly should be hanged for saying factual things and we're not going to talk about that because that's a national issue. But yeah, we live in the state with the per capita most veterans, and I think this has enough effect.
Totally. And then, so there's both the hyperbole of that, which is horrible. Trump loves to throw that, and we bite on that. But you're right, it's absolutely horrible. And then there's real, actual actions. He is actually having his retirement messed with
by administrative action.
Yeah.
So not like going in front of a court.
Right.
This has never happened before.
Oh, it's crazy.
And and we have a long history. I'm digressing, but
You got to get to 10 o'clock caucus.
President Eisenhower spoke out aggressively against the military-industrial complex and not allowing it to take over our country. John F. Kennedy spoke out aggressively about the military behaving in bad ways. And we have, I think, a history of folks with military experience having the eagle eye on our military and being able to critique it the most aggressively. And the Trump administration is trying to stamp that out.
Yeah.
Make the military just terrified to utter one word that the Trump administration might disagree with. And to me, I must make that an issue.
It's dangerous politically. It's also dangerous militarily. You need an open discussion militarily, or you get stuck in ways that get your ass kicked in a thing. Like the history militarily shows you need to be able to clear-eyed say, maybe we don't have the right strategy here. Maybe we don't have the right structure. Maybe we don't. So it is scary in our politics. It's bad for the military. Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about VICO.
Yeah.
So you were here during VICO. For listeners who, we've talked about it a lot on this podcast in the 300 episodes, but for folks who don't know, VICO was a company that provided all of the ancillary services for the oil industry on the North Slope, and was headed by Bill Allen, who had a lot of political power. He had purchased the Anchorage Times, and then after selling that, had a column in the ADN for a long time, basically had an outsized influence on Alaska politics for a very long time.
Yeah. What becomes exposed eventually is pure bribery. But for a lot of his power, it wasn't that. There were a couple legislators taking wads of hundreds, some taking ham sandwiches for their vote. But really his power came from VICO. VICO wasn't that good at its contracting stuff. When I talk to people in the business then and now, they're like, yeah, we had to go back in and fix a lot of VICO. So it wasn't its engineering and contracting skills, but they were the political muscle of the oil industry. And what they would do is, you knew if you were a VICO anywhere up, middle and management up, you would get a list of legislators that you sent money to. And right when the limits are 500 or 1,000 and your wife can do it with you, sometimes husbands, but often wives in that case, right? And you can mobilize 50, 100 highly paid execs, and they would be able to say some version of this, right? And hey, Andrew, hey, Eric, I know you don't like this bill pretty much. They weren't this crude, or sometimes they were, but you can either have a really easy reelection, or tomorrow your opponent gets $75,000. I mean, that was not an exaggeration. Mm-hmm. You and I have a firm moral compass, but that conversation you think about, and because I'd rather have some vacation time with my family than work my ass off and maybe get beat. And it's easy to say, well, it's just, everyone else is doing it, or it's just a little vote, or I'm here for education, not for oil stuff. So he had a tremendous amount of, as I said, I was in the minority, but he had a lock hold on the majority and some minority members, frankly. I think the oil industry themselves didn't want to dirty their hands with this, so Bill Allen will do it. And they'll throw him a bunch of contracts, which you'll half fuck up, and we'll fix it. And when Bill Allen would fly in on his private jet, you could almost feel it. There was almost, I could walk down these halls and go, I think Bill Allen's in town. And the level of suck up and control was scary. And everyone out there should understand Dad's quote when he was running for governor and president of the Senate was, we're not buying love, we're selling oil. We need to do this as a business. We see a bunch of oil industry ads where they're not selling oil up here. They're doing it to influence me, to influence you, right? And We need to get a fair price for the resource that we all own. This isn't communism or anti-business or whatever. This is business. We just need to do business better. And right now we're giving away your oil, in my opinion. And Bill Allen was making sure that happened over and over.
We had a presentation about the gas line. And in that presentation, there was talk about the history of how Alaska has managed the oil industry. And a quote that was in that presentation was about just the fact that the oil executives who are coming here are always going to have far more technical knowledge, economic knowledge about what they're asking. And we as legislators will always be functioning at a huge disadvantage by not being able to see into their books, not being able to see into the ground of the North Slope. And is it really as difficult as they say it is for them to get it out?
They have their books open. They have their engineering
and
stuff.
Everything that they say is going to be in the interest of them getting the best possible deal.
It better be. If I'm a Exxon shareholder, I expect
100%.
that. Yeah.
And what my takeaway from that slide is that I just feel like that many times we have stumbled into the trap of they're actually trying to help us and we should trust them. They are not trying to help Alaska. They are trying to help their bottom line. Every single time they are trying to help their bottom line, they are never going to suggest something that is in our best interest.
And they shouldn't. We need to be a better poker player, a better negotiator across the table. Joe Green, who I served with, who came out of the oil industry, his whole career was the oil industry. He came in, he was a Catholic. He had other things going on that were interesting to him, but basically it was an oil industry thing. And when we finally agreed to a confidentiality and looked at some things that were part of the negotiation on the gas line back then, I remember him coming back just amazed. He's like, they lied to me. I mean, he couldn't get it through his, or he could get it through his head, but barely, that he'd been lied to his whole life. And I remember saying to Joe, yeah, but it's kind of, they had to. It's not their fault. It's our fault. We didn't do our job.
And it's not just the oil and gas industry. The healthcare industry. I just was having this conversation in Pat Pitney's episode about when the insurance company comes and talks to you, they're talking about what's best for their bottom line, but they're going to phrase it in such a way as that if you do anything that takes $1 away from us, we'll have to leave Alaska. The hospitals tell you the same thing. The specialist doctors are going to tell you that, if you restrict our ability to earn $1 extra, we're not going to have any orthopedic surgeons in Alaska. This legislator, we're not experts in healthcare policy. We trust the person in front of us, and then goes to the floor and says, we can't do this bill to reform anything to do with healthcare insurance. We'll lose all healthcare insurance. And we're always functioning in this place of having to trust people who are never looking out for what's going to save us.
Absolutely. And I think it becomes then, if you're playing the long game, which clearly you are, information is as valuable as money. Dad shepherded through a lot of the oil taxes that fund the permanent fund. I remember Jay Hammond saying at one point, and I knew Jay as a kid, and then I knew him again when he's come back trying to defend the dividend and helped him then. But it was great, fabulous, interesting guy. But he said in the kind of prep mode, I want to tax them until they're just about to walk out the door and then back it off by $10 or whatever. But Dad, one of the things that Dad got was a thing called separate accounting, which instead of, how do you tax Exxon for its Alaska operations or any big company, but it's mainly the oil industry? Well, you can do it various ways. You can say, you have a national thing. We have this much of the population. We're going to take this much of your national operations. But separate accounting said, we want to look at how much you make from this as a profit center. And it got a lot more money, but really what it got was a window into how lucrative Alaska is for them. And it was so powerful, both in terms of the money it brought and the information it brought, that I think it was the major reason we had a late 70s flip in the House, and they repealed it in 1980. They hated it because it was kind of to do separate accounting right, you have to open your books and you say, yeah, this is one of the most profitable things in the world. And when we cry poverty to you, it's just bullshit. And so if you're playing the long game, you will often trade, and I hope you will, an information source that allows you to do good policy for 10 years for maybe, if you got the money versus information, take the information usually. That's what the pipeline litigation would do sometimes, is it would give us a window. One of the reasons Walker and crew were so adamant on it is they knew the books, because they, when Valdez says we're not getting our fair share, then that opens the books to say, well, actually, how much does the pipeline make? How valuable is it? And then they have that information. What were we talking about?
You know what I want to pivot to is you ran for governor and you ran for mayor. You lost 2 races. Yeah. I've never experienced losing a race. I hate running for office. I hate raising money. It's so profoundly despicable to me that
it's really some of the most disgusting.
It limits my ambition entirely. I just hate it. And I know who likes it. No one likes it. Like calling people on the phone and making small talk and then saying, well, hey, I'm running for office. Can you donate $500 today? I hate it.
And if you hate it, the higher you go, the more, we like the policy thing and maybe the speeches and meeting people and all the good things about it. And in a local race or a state house race or the assembly races, it's a mixture of those two. You have to do the phone calls, but it's a lot of the other. The higher you go, the more it is. When you get into statewide stuff, it's like 12 hours of call time.
I know.
And maybe
so you had
one of shaking hands. Yeah, I sort of went the mayor's medium, if you will, but governor was. The 2006, it was kind of an up or out. And that was Sarah Palin year.
Right.
It was like
Andrew
crazy.
Halcrow, Tony Knowles.
That's right. And so we were doing our thing. I was on the tour with Sarah. And that's why I was sounding the alarm of, hey, everywhere we go, Sarah's charming the hell out of people. And I think you guys are laughing at her and underestimating her. But everywhere I go, she's even impressing our people, right? And then Tony Knowles got in, which made it kind of, Tony
sucked all the oxygen out of the Democratic side.
I knew I wasn't going to win at that point. And so the question bowing out. Ethan decided he was in it as well. So he decided to be lieutenant governor candidate with Tony. And I remember him apologizing for it. I was like, I didn't want to be Tony Knowles lieutenant governor. Like, I have no interest in being lieutenant governor at all. I stayed in just to really talk about oil taxes, which was where Tony kind of fudged things. Great guy, love via Tony. But we've always disagreed on that issue. Yeah, and got beat like 75-25, which is an ass kicking, but I think it surprised him. I think he thought it was going to be 90%. Yeah, and that one wasn't so hard. Once Tony got in, I sort of went into a different gear on that. I was just raising.
You were prepared. You knew that that you were going to lose, but what can I use this platform for the next couple of months?
And the mayor's race was, in a sense, harder. I put more into it. I thought we could do it. I advanced, if you will, to the next round, and then Dan Sullivan, the other Dan Sullivan, tennis court Dan, not Ohio Dan, beat me in that. But that was it. It was 2009. It was a little bit of a Obama backlash. We'd done Obama to that whole. That
wasn't a good year for Democrats.
And then by 10, we're getting our ass kicked every year with Tea Party and stuff. So I got the early part of that. But I also think I'll own. The higher it went up, I think the worse I was as a candidate because of what you said. It's more and more call time and less actual door time. And I did like door to door. Sometimes you have to talk yourself into it, but it's where you're really they're worried about the school, or speed bumps were the most talked about one whole summer. Like you really get where people are. It also grounded me. In these fiscal policy discussions, sometimes Democrats, because we want a fiscal plan and we want funding for education, will be willing to talk about reductions in the dividend and door knocking. And particularly when my district moved from South Edition, very affluent, to having a lot of Spenard, a lot of Midtown, I saw what people did with that dividend. I saw, this gets winter coats, this gets the furnace fixed before, this gets a crappy used car to be used. And obviously we need to have long-term funding for education, but some significant dividend where a single mom with 3 kids gets a $1,500 each, that's $6,000 in the fall. That's one of the best social programs around.
Yeah, it's the only time you get like that one-time big bucket of cash
Yeah.
that you can use on a project that you put off forever.
The amount of Americans, and I've seen the numbers, and they're crazy, who are living paycheck to paycheck, who have less than, pick your number, 500 in their savings.
It's that one moment that they're not paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, I can now like fix the car or whatever. And the Republicans, of course, do it to the crazy other extreme. Well, then if 1,500 or 1,000 is good, let's have 5,000. Well, no, but I hope it doesn't end. I hope that's not the end of the thing. I would love a 50-50 constitutional split. We're getting wonky here, but some way that can say that it'll stay at a reasonable level and we have the other half or whatever you guys do.
50-50 is, I mean, so I represent a lower income district than you did, and I love the dividend. I think with our current sources of revenue, 50-50 is absolutely unsustainable.
If we do an oil tax, Willikowski's already put in.
If we do an oil tax, if we close the S Corp loophole, there's a lot of ifs that would have to happen.
Keel had an income tax 4 years ago that basically, unless you're a millionaire, billionaire, you wouldn't pay. You get.
Hey, you know what?
Those three components were done.
ICER did a presentation where they showed.
See, we're wonking out. We can't help you guys.
Yeah. ICER did a presentation where they showed that the difference in they showed all the taxes from most regressive to most progressive. Flat income tax is not that more regressive than that progressive one. A 3% flat income tax for the state of Alaska brings in $2 billion. And there's a lot of Republicans who said, I hate that progressive income tax thing. Make it fair. Make it the same for everybody. A flat 3% income tax. It's way more progressive than the sales tax. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, no, particularly because we have a progressive tax now, but there's so many ways to game it that the rich effective rate is way under. So I've come to almost the same conclusion. Hey, if you just get it clean.
Yeah, there's no gaming a flat one.
That's right.
You got to pay it.
It's probably going to be more progressive than your progressive with a bunch of weird exemptions that most working people can't do. No, so I just solved your fiscal situation.
It would be, but then this is a real problem. And Pat Pitney and I talked about it too, because she was saying that for her, balancing the budget is a math problem, and for legislators, it's a re-election problem. Yeah. And that she said, and we just focused on the math. And I was like, and your governor lost re-election. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. Hey, I want to ask about if you learned any lessons as a child growing up to politician father that you took when you became a father yourself. Did you think that your childhood was absolutely amazing and you wanted to give that exact same experience to your children? How many kids do you have?
Two.
So
it was really fun and idyllic. As I said, we always came down. So it was always this mess of a thing. One year.
You did half a year in Juneau, half a year in Anchorage for school?
Yeah. And they made it fun. Mom and Dad made it cool. Riding on the ferry, right? Even the drive. One winter, particularly cold winter, and we weren't caravanning then, but we had this big station wagon, and it was getting colder and colder, and we're trying to get the ferry in Haines, and the car, so we've got this packed with one big dog and a bunch of clothes in the back and 3 kids, and our station wagon, it turned out to be minus 78 outside of Tok. And it hit national news because the car just kind of froze. And we spent a night at 78 below, just short of 80 below. And I remember they put Kim and I, my sister, in the same sleeping bag. I was complaining about that, right? The indignity of being in a sleeping bag with your sister at whatever, 7 or 8, I think I was. She was 6. They took all the clothes out and put a bunch on and then wrapped kind of Lee, the youngest, between them. The dog was freaking out. And then a tow truck, tough old guy who was running the roads, came by and we all piled in, and Tok opened up the bar and served us eggs. And anyway, it was a very cool deal. But Dad got out just as I was getting into high school. It became harder and harder to leave in the middle of a school year. When you're 7, it's whatever. You miss your friends, whatever, but it's a new adventure, cool. Junior high became harder. I was a pretty good student, and then you come through and I remember getting an actual F when I came to Juneau because they'd all studied biology and I hadn't. I just, staring at it like, and the Juneau kids didn't like the legislative kids. And I see why. We're kind of snotty little arrogant stuff, and they've got their thing going, and here we come in. So you'd always have to fight a couple of times before things calmed down. Anyway, Dad never put any guilt trip, but I think the reason he got out as I got into high school was this is now hurting instead of helping. And he never put that on me, but I think it was his time to do something different. And then my kids were younger, but I could see it getting a little harder. And the last year, they didn't come down. And then that's awful lonely, right? You're either going to bars with people you shouldn't.
I know. And so my son goes to German immersion school, and we don't have that in Juneau.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah,
so he's always stayed in Anchorage, and I go home every weekend. But on those occasional weekends where I can't go home, it's like I feel so guilty.
Yeah. We would have them come down as kids some weekends, and that would work. But it's tough. We shouldn't whine about a job we both sought and appreciated having, but it does affect families. It both its weirdnesses, but also the time commitment down here does it. On the other hand, Juneau's a beautiful, fun, interesting place.
It is a beautiful and fun place. Hey, last question, since we're towards the end of our time. You are the chair of the Alaska Democratic Party. How long have you been in that role?
Just a year, yeah.
A year. It feels like brand new, but a year is some time. Tell us about what that experience has been like.
I've been a Democrat all my life, but not heavy involved in party politics. Would come in and see everyone as an elected official, but then get out. Well, what talked me into it is Mary Peltola and some others said, we'd like a really energized, effective, well-funded, well-organized party because we think 26 has to be a big year and can be a big year. And I think with the slate, you're seeing 3 really interesting, good Democrats in the governor's race. Mary, our lead dog, right, running in the U.S. Senate. And then this interesting choice between a guy I really like, Reverend Matt Schultz, running as a Democrat, and I'm just starting to learn about Bill Hill on the independent side. So we've got very good candidates statewide. We've got a great legislative crew. I think we're doing that. We really feel like it's our Super Bowl 26, that this is the year we can do some big stuff. Alaska's been moving towards, in each of the presidential years, you can see it's getting closer and closer. And I hope this is the year we pop through. We kind of have to save democracy. When I first got elected, I'm like, well, I'm just going to stay in Alaska. I don't want to go to DNC cocktail parties in freaking Virginia or something. And basically got talked into going. And a lot of it is true. It's a wasted time. But when I talk to them about us in Alaska, we are so different. We're so unique. I knew we were a little weird, but the coalition you're in, nobody does it. When I say we have 14 Ds, 5 Is, and 2 Rs.
Montana did it?
Yeah.
Somebody just recently.
It's like
People are copying.
It was 0,
Yeah.
and then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, we'll just end on that. Maybe I can come back sometime. Oh, yeah, we even once put a moderate Republican governor, slapped a lieutenant governor that's a D, split the cabinet, and did some shit. And they're like, I have antlers. Nobody does that. We have maybe the antidote for the crazy shit that's going on when you can really have a caucus that stays together and has a pretty big range.
Well, we're going to go over, and I'm going to get in trouble, but I'm going to tell you this.
Yeah.
We had a CSG panel about the specialness of Alaska, and I pushed back on that in front of all the other states when they said, well, what's the secret ingredient? The secret ingredient is 40 House reps, and it's 20 to 20. And the only way we're going to find a majority is somebody's going to have to move. If we had, as your experience of being in the minority for a decade, if there were 30 Republicans, there's no coalition. Right. If there were 30 Democrats, there's no coalition. Really, what is the secret ingredient? We have to make coalition.
Okay, but the U.S. House is tied, and they're not doing it. They just freaking fight and call a month a day or a day an hour or whatever they did.
Right, that's true. That's true.
So,
but they don't have the history that we have of decades of forming coalitions because of the special Bush caucus, and its willingness to go to either group. I mean, we have this model that makes it
that then we modify.
That we slip into.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So
let's do this next time.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, thanks so much for being on the show.
Pleasure, man. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akleg.gov or call 907-465-4940.